Let's go Dommario. Let's go Dommario into Gallo Tower. That just seems like a fun time. I mean, who's going to be upset about Dommario? Dommario into Gallo Tower, right? Is that just a good time? So, wait a minute. What if? No. We'll do Dommario. Okay. Arcanas, hyper, all the good stuff. Let's go weird ass projectile speed. So, what I want to talk about. Oh my god. Excuse me. Thank you. What I want to talk about today is the leaderboard as it is today. I want to talk a little bit about the game itself. What I think is really, really good about the game, where I hope the game develops over time. And kind of what I even like a few things that I think other game developers could learn from the success of Vampire Survivors. That's what we're gonna talk about today. Let's start with the more pertinent discussion, which is the discussion around leaderboards. So, how to kick this off? I think Spellbinder we're gonna get for free, so we're not gonna worry about that. So as you know, there are currently I guess there's four. There's four different leaderboard categories, right? So we have the kill leaderboard, the level leaderboard, the survival leaderboard, and the gold leaderboard. And when the game first came out, there was a lot of creativity around trying to find the optimal setups for each of those different leaderboard types. So if you think about pre-curse, pre-llama, pre-Lita, like before all of these like just overwhelmingly strong strategies, there was a lot more creativity. So in the very first time, like the very first moments when the leaderboard came out, it was typically decided that Arca was the de facto best for a lot of the runs, but there was still quite a bit of variety. Some people would try to go with Mortaccio, thinking that the projectiles would beat it out. So you have this constant push-pull between is kills better with extra projectiles, is kills better with Arca, with lower cooldowns, and then you get into levels and things got even more crazy, because then you could kind of go all three, because Imelda now got in the mix, because you could say, oh, Imelda gets the 15% extra leveling bonus, and that's going to do better than, having more kills with Arca and more kills with Mortaccio. And then you get like Pentagram mixed in, and people started playing around with, okay, maybe it's luck, that's the most important. So you can get better pentagram hits, and so you can get more rosaries, right? A lot of creativity, a lot of unique styles of builds. Very, very interesting strategies were coming out. And then we started to see, with a couple of releases, some dominant metas. The first was the era of Curse, right? Llama comes in, and by the way, I'm not talking about survival and gold yet. I'll get to those in a minute. But Llama comes in and basically resets the discussion by making it very obvious that the number one most valuable thing in level and in kill runs is number of generated enemies. And so the whole meta shifts around Llama. And suddenly, Curse becomes the most valuable asset, and it's all about generating the most amount of curse while maintaining a relatively high clear speed. So for kill runs, it's all about that early game. You're grabbing things like Song of Mana. You're trying to get as early curse as possible. And there's still a lot of, like, you know, fluctuation around some of your edge items. Like you're gonna take Axe because you start with it. You're gonna take Labora because Labora turned out to be a dominant strategy with the Labora Shuffle. You're gonna take Lightning Ring once, you know, Thunder Loop came out. You're gonna take Rune Tracer, unupgraded or unevolved Rune Tracer. And then, you know, past that point, different options, right? You could take Fire Wand because you have the spinach. Some people will take Knives because you often will take projectile speed. So Cross for a while became the dominant early game strategy. So things got mixed up a lot, right? Even at that stage. Then Pugnala comes out, and the discussion shifts a bit, and it's very quickly realized that even though Pugnala doesn't get as much curse as Llama, the power creep of Firagi when it comes to clearing on screen is so high that immediately guns, and in particular late game strength scaling with Firagi, with Pugnala, become the clear dominant strategy. And more or less eviscerates in both the kills and in the level strategy. It becomes all about getting your guns evolved as early as possible and getting Skull as early as possible, and everything else becomes subjected to that strategy. And you get the first major, I would say. Prior to that, like, Llama runs could be frustrating because it was a lot on, like, getting items, getting your Skull early, getting you know, your Song of Mana early. But, you know, that wasn't like too stressful. You had a couple of early draws you wanted to get, but I would say if you got like 10 runs with a Song of Mana early, like 3 out of those 10 would be like contenders for top 10 spots if you played them well. And I feel like that's a pretty good zone to be in, right? Where like 30% of your runs are at least going to have the potential to make it to 30 minutes and actually do a pretty decent job. So if we're looking at like my preference in terms of like level of RNG influence, I would say that's a pretty good ratio. I could even go as far as to say like 1 out of 10. If that 1 out of 10 means that in the first minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, you know whether the run's going to continue, I'm fine with a 1 out of 10 ratio. And I think I would be comfortable saying leaderboards with a 1 out of 10 ratio of success past the 3-minute mark is a pretty decent ratio. That means you're grinding out your rerolls for your first one, and that's probably 4 or 5 rerolls per run. And then out of those runs, 1 out of 10 can continue past 3 minutes. And I think that was a perfectly fine area. It was still a little bit annoying because there wasn't any creativity. It was like Pugnala or nothing. No one could really compete. There was like a moment where people tried to innovate with Yada. And Yada got up there for a little while, but basically dominated by Pugnala. And then the great shift. Lita comes out and radically transforms the landscape of runs. And there was a decision, there was a poll, and by the way, I still back this decision. I'm not going to backtrack on the decision because I don't think this decision is the problem. But there was a decision, there was a vote in the community with Lita being so powerful, is it okay that Lita becomes an option inside of these runs? And I still even now, I back the idea that any character that can be gained without editing the game file, modding, should be valid. So like a lot of people said, like, should Toasty be removed? I disagree. I think any character that can be character that can be unlocked through in-game methods is completely valid as an option. And again, I don't believe that Lita is the problem. Before Lita, it was Pugnala. Before Pugnala, it was Llama. So before Lita came out, we still had a dominant meta with a single character basically destroying... You're not opening a coffin. Okay. You're basically destroying both the kills and level builds with a single character. Because it all becomes around how quickly you can kill things, right? There's always going to be number one. 100%, 100%. So I'm fine with having meta characters. And again, I don't think this is the problem with the leaderboard. So now, Lita comes out, dominates the leaderboard, and then we have Arcana. And in the first couple patches, or the first patch when Arcanas came out, the last patch, I think we still didn't have a problem. Because the Arcanas, the likelihood of not getting the Arcana that you want in the time that you want it was incredibly slim. Right? You have automatic awake at the start of your run if you want it. Or if you're a slash guy, you take slash, whatever, right? So you pick your first Arcana, and then there were only 5 other ones. So in your second Arcana, you're basically guaranteed, you know, a vast majority of the times you're gonna get the Arcana that you want. And even if you don't, you're getting an Arcana that you're gonna need at the end. So the worst case scenario is you get your third Arcana second instead of third, which is annoying, but not like necessarily run ending at the time that we were talking about, right? So you would get, it'd be the difference between getting slash at level 11 or getting fire at level 11, right? The burn at level 11. What? Not a big deal. Second patch gets released. New Arcanas get entered in. Lita's still dominating. Different Arcana strategies, some different weapon strategies. But the problem now is that the layers of RNG to get a run that is actually able to qualify for like a top 10 run, it's extremely high. And I think the ratio of being able to perform the run effectively and getting the right RNG is insanely high. So consider now the likelihoods. I'm not gonna roll this out in like official statistics. I'm not gonna do the math. But let's just assume a scenario, right? That original scenario still exists. You still need to get an insanely good start. Okay? You get an insanely good start, and you have that 1 out of 10. So 1 out of 10 decent starts will let you roll into a potential leaderboard level run. Well, now at 11 minutes, there's a 50% chance that you don't get, it's not 50%, it's slightly higher than 50%, but let's say 50%, right? 50% chance that your run is going to end at 11 minutes. And then you have a second roll at 21 minutes, and let's say that it's a 2/3 chance that your run's going to end at 21 minutes. And now, to get the overall statistics, is it 75%? So let's say it's 50 and 75%. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So you add those together, but it's actually not a 75% chance because you still have your 1 out of 10 to even get to the 75%. Right? You still have your 1 out of 10 to get to the 75%. So now you multiply that by your, 90%, or I guess you do the reverse. So you have 25% times 10%. You now have a 2.5% chance to get a run that's actually potentially going to make it on the leaderboard. And that's just straight RNG. 2.5% chance with perfect RNG to even have a chance at the leaderboard. And by the way, you don't know about that 2.5% chance until you're 21 minutes into the run. And it's only going to get worse. It's only going to become more RNG dependent, and it's only going to become less and less skill based. Those are two opposites, right? The more RNG dependent it is, the less it's based on skill and innovation, and so on. And I now start to question both the viability and, in general, the excitement, or how to say it. I feel like leaderboard runs are going to go away as an interesting thing to watch with Vampire Survivors, because you're not watching someone who did an incredible performance, who, came up with a really good strategy, who executed at an extremely high level. You're watching someone who got extremely lucky. It's basically lottery with some skill involved. And again, even that would be fine if that lottery happened relatively early. Like by 5 minutes you knew. By 5 minutes you know, is this going to be a good run or not? But it's not by 5 minutes. It's by 21 minutes into the run. So with that, so the question is, where am I getting at with this? Also, I think we just lost our music. Why did you stop playing? So we were going great here. The music player just stopped playing. So I see one of two options. I see one of two options to fix this issue overall. What in the world am I going to take? Slash makes sense. We have 3 crit items. Okay. This should evolve the guns. Oh no, we have the evolved guns. Oh, we don't have I was like, why didn't that evolve our Bible? It's because our Bible requires Spellbinder, which we don't have. Okay, we're gonna start migrating to get these items now. Let me grab a fire real quick. We should be fine to just kind of roll. Okay, so getting to the point. In summary, problem statement. Runs are far too RNG. And you find out way too late in the run whether your run is going to be valid or not. So you're going to invest a lot of time, roughly 21 minutes, before you even know if your run is going to be able to make it to the leaderboard. And even if you execute perfectly, if you don't get the RNG you need, your run is over. It's done. All right, that's the problem statement. I know, long-winded problem statement. Now, the game is not about leaderboards, and so I think anything drastic that reduces the overall fun of the game should be avoided. So we need to find a good solution. I am from the US, specifically St. Louis, Missouri. So we need to find a solution that doesn't impact the fun of the game, the roguelite nature of the game, the RNG element of the game, but still have leaderboards be fun if we're going to keep them around long term. So let's talk about different solutions. So solution number 1, the most obvious one, you ban Arcanas. I actually don't like this solution. The reason I don't like the banning Arcanas, I think that Arcanas create very, very interesting gameplay. And I think denying people the ability to kind of play and have the fun of like the roguelite have the fun of the modifications from the arcanas built into the leaderboards, I think makes a lot of sense. So option number 1, banning arcanas. We take that one off the table because I think arcanas are too fun to get rid of, and they're interesting and they make the game interesting. Okay, so if we're not banning arcanas, option number 2, we allow edited save states. Meaning that you can generate any combination of achievements that you want, as long as it's realistically possible to get those achievements. You can basically create a save game state that then you use for all of your runs. Downsides to this is it's a barrier to entry for people that don't know how to manage those save states. So you immediately get a segmentation of the leaderboard because you're only going to have people that know how to manage the save states. Yeah, seeds basically, but seeds in the form of save seeds, right? So not a seed. A seed is in a given run what is going to be my RNG. A save state is in a given game file what weapons, accessories, and yeah, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe not save states, save files. So having an edited save file where you can basically generate, and again, it has to be possible. You can't create a save game just by editing the save game. You'd have to actually generate it, put in the effort. Someone would have to build the appropriate save game file. But so that you have just the arcanas that you want, and just the weapons that you want, and just the accessories that you want. So the good thing about this would be the differentiator between the highest level runs would be your ability to perform the run, and just knowing, having the game knowledge to get the ideal, upgrade. And there would still be RNG. There would still be RNG around getting the right upgrades at the right time and things like that. And there would be garbage. You would still have garbage because everything that you start with is not good. So there's still going to be the RNG element of having to get the right items, but it's largely going to shift from RNG to player skill. But as I said, the big downside of this style is that, again, you segment your player base. Players that know how to do this and players that don't. And the players that don't, that just want to play the leaderboard, may not realize they're going to be playing at just a straight up disadvantage because they don't have the same game file that everybody else is using. Now, that risk is a little bit mitigated because typically somebody who actually wants to get on the leaderboard will at least go figure out how people get on the leaderboard, and then they would see a tutorial that says, hey, if you want to have like a leaderboard relevant run, you're going to want to get this save game state, or save this. You want to get this save file, and you're going to want to run with this save file. Okay. Then there is a third option. The third option would be, instead of just having rerolls, that the devs add a kind of run, how to say this, a run sandbox, and gave you the tools to turn on and off what you would like to see in your run within a certain level of flexibility. And actually, I think this is the coolest option. I don't want seeds. I don't want everyone playing the same seed, because I think that takes the fun out of it. I do think the RNG element is really important, but I like the idea of pre-run selections. Select a certain number maximum or certain minimum number of weapons that are in the pool. Select a certain minimum number of accessories that are in the pool. Select a certain minimum number of arcana that are available in the pool. And I think with something like that, a kind of like prepared RNG, you still get the RNG effect, which is why I would say there would need to be minimums in all of those categories. But you also shift some of the RNG necessary components to leaderboard runs today. You shift some of that back over to skill. So again, just to summarize, option 1, we just remove Arcanas. I think that's too drastic. I think it removes the fun of the Arcanas. Option 2, we have prepared save game files, and you can share those save game files, and people are generally going to run those save game files when they're doing leaderboard runs. And then option 3, the devs add a pre-game selection, a sandbox mode, where you're allowed a minimum number of weapons, a minimum number of accessories, and a minimum number of Arcana. And then the final option, which is don't do anything and see if leaderboard runs are still relevant, or at least broadly relevant, as the game adds more and more and more Arcana. I think it won't. I think the Arcana RNG, without any type of way to like work around it, will eventually break people who are trying to do leaderboard runs into not wanting to do leaderboard runs anymore. So now, I'm open to thoughts from chat, and we can have a discussion. That's my hypothesis. That's my TED Talk on the leaderboards. Let's take each argument. Any responses to those arguments that you want me to tackle? Do you think Arcana inclusion was a bad idea for the longevity of the game? Absolutely not. Because the vast majority of the players do not play this game to get on the leaderboard. They play it for fun. And I think Arcanas are amazingly fun. I love the idea. And by the way, I'm a big proponent of this now anyway, more than I was before. I think trying to make difficult builds work and kind of just messing around and experimenting is the longevity of this game. And the more like batshit that gets added into this game, I think the better that it is. So 100%, I am 100% add all the shit that you want to the game, make it insane, because I think it adds more variety and more fun and more replayability. Given that as a baseline, that absolutely, I think the variety and all that, I think it's great. That's why I made my proposals about how I think we can rein in the RNG while still making the general population, which is really the population that needs to get served the most, the general population enjoy the game and all of the craziness that comes from having massive options, massive variety, and just an insane amount of content available. Don't you think it will be a bigger entry barrier, already established players dominating the leaderboard? So that's why I like the idea of keeping the Arcana and keeping all the new characters and stuff. I think that long term adds a lot of variety, right? So like now, again, so take this option 3 or this option 2, these ones where we prep game files or where we have this kind of pre-selection sandbox mode. Both of those allow for creativity. I can go in there and say, like, you know what? No one's been taking Bible ever, but now they added this Arcana where the Bible moves in and out, and suddenly it can wave clear like a son of a bitch, and I want to see if that's going to beat out everybody else's builds. And I can use that selection, or I can use that new RNG to experiment and try new things. So I think that these kinds of tools allow the developer to have unrestrained, add whatever you want, break the game, because I think that's what's been super fun about the game. And we'll talk about that in a little bit in more detail, but not destroy the leaderboard enjoyment and the competitiveness of the leaderboard. Maybe it's too soon for that stuff. There's still much content to be released. 100%. I'm not saying that this has to be done like next patch. I'm just saying that at version 1.0, also LaFelpo, thank you for the subscription. Appreciate your support. I'm saying that at version 1.0, when all the weapons, all the characters, all the maps, and all the Arcana are released, I think the leaderboard meta will have burned people out. I think that people won't want to play leaderboard runs anymore for the reasons that I've been discussing. A lot more people are trying to do leaderboards than we think, and a sandbox will have more variety. That's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. I think that a sandbox mode with limitations. It should not be pick your 6 weapons, pick your 6, pick your 6 accessories, pick your 3 Arcana. That's stupid. But if it's like pick 12 weapons, pick 12 accessories, and pick 8 Arcana. Maybe it's 6. Maybe it's 6 Arcana. The original 6, like, that was a pretty good spot. So you pick 12 weapons, 12 accessories, 6 Arcana at a minimum. And that's the minimum RNG that you have to have in your run. I think that's a very, very nice, safe spot to be in. There's still a level of RNG, and yet you still have to like demonstrate that you're skilled at the game. Let me look at some other questions that I might have missed. I feel like a lot of people... Okay, we talked about that already. I want the game to be less of a lawnmower experience and more of a matter of survival. I agree. I'll talk about that in a minute. I don't disagree, Rayan. I think that that's exactly right. I think there's a little bit of that lost right now. Why so many rune tracers? Because I have an extremely low cooldown and extremely high duration, and the combination makes a lot of rune tracers on the screen. I think this game needs harder content. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. That makes you need to use the OP Arcana in builds. I mean, that's true, but I mean, that was always going to be the case. The problem is landing those builds is so insanely difficult that it's like, it's not fun to try. It's not fun to even try because you have to play the game for 6 hours just to get a run with all the RNG that you need to get a leaderboard level run. And those weren't full runs. You spent 80-90% of that time starting the game over at 1 minute or 11 minutes, and that's not fun. I didn't play the whole game. I literally played the same, first 11 minutes for 5 hours, and then I got 2 good runs that both didn't make it on the leaderboard. That's not fun. Yeah, reset survivors, exactly. And so I think that on version 1.0, I don't think people go for leaderboards anymore, except for the, extremely dedicated who want to maintain their spot. I'm certainly, after yesterday and the day before, I am not having fun doing leaderboard runs anymore. And obviously the game isn't made for me. It's made for a wider audience, but I don't think I'm alone in that feeling. That the leaderboards, I mean, Mr. Sefi, he came into chat the other day. He confirmed he's also kind of tired of leaderboards because the RNG is just out of control. So I don't think I'm the minority of people that do the leaderboard. I think the leaderboard has suffered where the game in general has gotten better. I think the leaderboard meta, and in particular people that run leaderboards, are having a worse and worse time as the game adds more RNG elements. But I don't think that it has to be. I don't think that it has to be one or the other. I don't think that it has to be only fun or only competitive. And I think there's a good middle ground where the game allows you to tighten up the RNG, give you the controls to tighten the RNG a bit, to make it more competitive, while still being able to fully release control and go all-in lottery mode when you want to play that way. I don't think that it has to be one or the other. I think that it has to be only fun or only competitive. And I think there's a good middle ground where the game allows you to tighten up the RNG, give you the controls to tighten the RNG a bit, to make it more competitive, while still being able to fully release control and go all-in lottery mode when you want to play that way. And competitive level of game is super good for like a content creation, which in turn gets people to want to play the game, which expands the competitive player pool, which makes more competitive content, which generates more interest. Like, do you think that League of Legends would still be around today if the game wasn't competitive? No, it wouldn't. The game is not fun enough without the competition to have lasted for, you know, what are we on, season 10, season 11? I don't know. It's not fun enough without the competitive nature of the game. So I think that for longevity of a game like this, you want to have a certain level of competitiveness, and it's never going to be speedruns because the game is unspeedrunnable. So that was my long-winded. Any other thoughts? I feel like there's not actually enough challenge in the game for leaderboards to express player ability. That's what I'm saying. That's why I think, like, if you remove, oh, you mean, okay. So you're saying that even if we remove the RNG, there's still not enough room for player ability to be expressed. I mean, I guess it depends. On a per patch metas level, I kind of agree with that. And I would assume that the meta probably settles within like 3-4 days of a patch. So what the typical leaderboard meta has been, game gets patched, people grind out leaderboards, around 3-4 days in, the meta's been established, and then 3-4 days after that, the meta is basically locked in, and people aren't breaking new records. And then a new patch comes along and the whole thing resets. And what I'm suggesting is that that process will fundamentally break due to the level of RNG. That people won't even entertain trying competitive runs anymore. And that to me is a shame, because I think there's a lot of fun in the competitive nature of the game. But if people know that they're going to have to roll insanely high just to get a leaderboard level run, I don't think they're even going to try. But I don't disagree. I think that there's still a huge gap between the cap of power level and the difficulty ramping of the game. 100% agree with that. So then let's shift to the discussion. So discussion point 1, I think I've exhausted. Let's finish this run and then I will start discussion point 2. Any final thoughts on specifically leaderboards before we jump into the second piece of discussion, which will be more about the game in general, what I think is so good about it, what I think could be improved, and things. Anyway, we'll talk about that in the next run. How are we doing in this run? I think we're just crushing it. I mean, talking about ease of play, I've basically been able to turn my brain off and just roll an extremely high value run without too much effort. I mean, I guess that's the one. Leaderboard runs are frustration fest, not good game design. I mean, it depends. It depends on what the game is trying to do. So compare with like a game like Dicey Dungeons, okay? Dicey Dungeons. Is there a space for player expression? 100%. Is that space big enough to make the game competitive? Absolutely not. There's no Dicey Dungeons tournaments. It's a roguelite deck builder that was never intended to be a competitive game. It's a game that you're meant to play through all the way, have a great time as you play through all the way, and then yeah, if you want to like, you know, do some challenges beyond that, you can. But basically, once you've played through the game, you wipe your hands, you move on, and you had a good time, and it's done. And if that's what Vampire Survivors, that's what the devs want out of Vampire Survivors, is a dicey dungeons experience. You play through the campaign, you play through all the levels, and then maybe replay them every once in a while when you think it's going to be fun. More power to them, and that's what they can go for. I don't get the feeling that that's what was intended with Vampire Survivors. Whether it was intended to be competitive, I don't think it was intended to be competitive. I do think the game was intended to be hard. I think the game was intended to be hard, and I think that the game was intended to be extremely replayable. And typically games that are hard and replayable, thank you Mirasu91 for the subscription. I think games that are intended to be hard and replayable are really, really good games to make competitive. And so I disagree with the idea that whether a game was intended to be competitive or not, I think that there are common elements that you can get from highly competitive games. And certainly the two items I mentioned are not exhaustive, but I would say that games that are difficult and games that are replayable with a few additional attributes tend to be very good games for competitive play. And given that the game's premise is be difficult and be endlessly replayable, I think it's a valid assumption that people will try to make the game competitive, that the longevity of the game will be significantly improved by the quality of that competitive nature. Ergo, why I'm even having this discussion. Hello. Welcome, Johnny Be Good. Most roguelites are intended to be difficult and replayable, but I can't think of any that are considered competitive. People competitively play Slay the Spire. Huge speedrun community. People competitively played Monster Train. I know because I ran the tournaments. People competitively play... I'm trying to think. People competitively play Hades. People do races on Hades, speedrunning, and difficulty levels. Binding of Isaac has competitive speedrunning and competitive nature. Damn, even like Autopets has a competitive nature. No, now that game you do play versus people, so there's a thing there. I think a lot of these roguelites have a competitive community. Certainly, I don't think any of them are as well established in terms of like knowledge about them as Vampire Survivors Leaderboard is. For some reason, the Leaderboard became a thing. But I think that all of them have a competitive community.